Good morning. The hearing on the Committee of Agriculture entitled The Next Farm Bill, Technology and Innovation in Specialty Crops will come to order. I've asked Trent Kelly to offer our prayer. Trent, go here, Trent.
Bow your heads. Dear Lord, we just thank you this day for each and everything that you've given all of us. Dear Lord, we just thank you for those that you've blessed with the farms and the land and the resources and the technology to create the greatness of this nation through our farmers, who first and foremost feed and provide for not only this nation but for the entire world. And we just thank you and ask that all that we do in this committee honor you and help those farmers to produce. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Trent. Good morning, and again, thank you all for joining us. Specialty crops play an important role in the success of U.S. food agriculture and are an essential component of our national food policy, the Farm Bill. Diversity among crops, ranging from fruits and vegetables to tree nuts to nursery crops and floriculture, makes the task of developing the specialty crop safety net particularly challenging. Despite those challenges, significant investments, including those made in the 2014 Farm Bill to support the various sectors, have positively impacted our specialty crop producers. So it baffles me when Farm Bill detractors question our commitment to specialty crops, implying that our country lacks a national food policy just because we treat specialty crops differently than traditional commodities. Over the years, those of us who work on farm policy have worked closely with producers to develop programs tailored to meet the needs of our specialty crop producers. We recognize that the challenges of a citrus producer in California look much different than those of a cotton farmer in West Texas, and we believe our agriculture policy should reflect those differences. So this notion that we don't invest in specialty crops simply isn't based in fact. Let me give you a few examples. The Specialty Crop Block Grant Program helps enhance the competitiveness of specialty crops by facilitating partnerships between USDA and the state departments of agriculture to provide funding. The Plant Pest and Disease Prevention Program provides early plant pest detection and surveillance and funds a system of clean plant centers to safely distribute disease-free plant material to producers of nursery stock. The Specialty Crop Research Initiative sets aside mandatory funding to ensure that specialty crops are not sidelined for research funding. And the Market Access Program aids the development and expansion and maintenance of foreign markets for U.S. agricultural products. In fact, half of the participating organizations in the fiscal 2017 fiscal year were focused exclusively on specialty crops. The Food Insecurity Nutrition Incentive Grant Program aims to increase the purchase of fruits and vegetables among participants in the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program for providing incentives at the point of purchase. And finally, we've made significant strides over the past several years in expanding crop insurance coverage to a variety of specialty crops, including the whole farm revenue protection policy that was developed with specialty crops in mind. The United States has long had an interest in ensuring stable production of our staple commodities, which is one of the reasons we continue to enjoy the safest, most abundant, and affordable food supply in the world. But when you pull all the pieces of the Farm Bill together, it's clear we've made huge investments to aid specialty crop producers as well. Looking forward, our goal is to maintain these advancements and address improvements needed in the next Farm Bill. As we do that, I'm particularly interested in the role that technology plays in those advancements. To that end, I'd like to welcome all of our witnesses today, and I look forward to hearing from all of you about ways we can build our public-private partnerships and innovation to benefit specialty crop producers. With that, I yield to the ranking member for comments he might have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our panel of witnesses for joining us today on this hearing on technology and innovation in specialty crop production. I'm looking forward to hearing your testimony and on the opportunities and challenges the specialty crop sector has and the impact of Farm Bill programs on your productivity and profitability. Since the 2008 Farm Bill, I've been particularly interested in the role specialty crop production has in the healthy ag economy and in providing healthy foods to consumers. It's really amazing to see the amount of money that you have invested just to produce your crops. And while hundreds of acres of corn may be worth several $100,000, that same number of acres planted in strawberries may be worth several $1 million. So the folks in my area, we're not sure if we understand how you guys do it, but hats off to you. We've tried to address some of these production differences through the Farm Bill, and I'm proud that the 2008 Farm Bill was the first to acknowledge the growing demand for fresh fruits and vegetables, local foods, and organic production. and I'm also proud that we were able to continue and build on these investments in the 2014 bill. I hope this trend continues into the next Farm Bill. I believe the specialty crop area is in a very unique position. Consumer demand is increasing, but natural resources remain fixed, and the labor supply is shrinking. It seems to me that the key to being successful will be through the wise use of technology and with the optimum regulatory structure that allows innovation to flourish. So again, I look forward to the hearing from the witnesses, and I thank the chair and yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen. The chair would request that other members submit their opening statements for the record so our witnesses may begin their testimony to ensure there's ample time for questions. And I'd like to welcome our witnesses to the table. First off, we have Mr. Paul Winger, President of the California Farm Bureau Federation, Sacramento, California. With Mr. Paul Heler, Vice President, Wonderful Citrus, Texas Division, Mission, Texas. We have Mr. Gary Wishnatzki. Is that close? All right, owner and the Wish Farms in Plant City, Florida. And I've turned to Mr. Panetta to introduce our next witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. It is my absolute honor to introduce my friend and constituent, Kevin Murphy. Kevin's the CEO of Driscoll's, based in Watsonville, there on the Central Coast of California. My district, the Central Coast of California, proudly produces over 100 specialty crops, with companies like Driscoll's leading the industry. Operating for over a century, Driscoll's produces fresh strawberries, raspberries, blueberries, and blackberries for both domestic and international consumers. Kevin's company has proven adaptive with both conventional and organic production and will continue to innovate as a way to address challenges with water, labor, and food safety moving forward. I personally have witnessed Kevin's and the past CEO and Chairman Miles Ryder's ability to not only think outside the box, but to also contribute to our community. And I have no doubt that under Kevin's leadership, Driscoll's will continue to build upon the company's history of success. And that's why, Kevin, it's an honor to have you here. And I thank you for being here and from the Central Coast, and I look forward to your testimony.
And then we also have Mr. Andrew LaVine, President, CEO, American Seed Trade Association in Alexandria, Virginia. Mr. Winger, before you begin, Mr. Costa has asked to say something bad about you. So you're,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. President Paul Winger of the California State Farm Bureau Association is no stranger to the halls here of Washington or Sacramento, but more importantly, Paul and his family reflect what is so good about America and California agriculture, and that is he and his family have been doing it for generations, and we're honored to have him here with his expertise and his advocacy to talk about this subject on this morning's hearing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Winger, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Costa, for those kind words. But thank you, Chairman Conaway and Ranking Member Peterson, for the opportunity to present here today. I am a third-generation California farmer, growing a variety of crops, with almonds and walnuts being our principal commodities. At the outset, Mr. Chairman, I would like to thank you for your efforts to bring the committee to my hometown of Modesto in August for a field hearing. We really appreciate that. California is blessed with a unique geography, microclimates, and water resources, which allows us to be the nation's largest agricultural production and exporting state, growing more than a third of our nation's vegetables and 2/3 of our nation's fruits and nuts. Of those, we grow more than 99% of the nation's almonds, artichokes, dates, dried plums, figs, garlic, kiwi fruit, olives and olive oil, pistachios, raisins, table grapes, and walnuts. Considering that specialty crop programs receive 1% of the total Farm Bill funding and 4% of the non-nutrition title funding, it's vital that increased consideration is given to the most critical needs of specialty crops. California specialty crop growers have long led the way in adopting and embracing new technologies and innovation in order to remain competitive and profitable. Until laws and regulations on labor, immigration, taxes, the environment, food safety, crop protection, and trade better reflect real-world realities of family farming, the best bet for future success growing specialty crops can be summed up in one word: innovation. The most significant innovation that can be achieved on the farm is increased mechanization. This need arises as the pool of available workers dramatically declines. Specialized equipment, robotics, and other tools can help offset the growing labor shortage. If we don't aggressively invest in the development of new technologies, the consequence will be to lose a large share of our nation's specialty crop production. As such, there has never been a greater need for accelerated leaps of innovation for specialty crops. Of all Farm Bill research funds, about 15% are directed to specialty crops. Mechanization is already in place for a number of specialty crops such as nuts, wine grapes, and processing tomatoes. However, the production of fresh fruits and vegetables is still predominantly done by people working in the field and mostly done by hand. Our land-grant university system was integral to the development of labor-saving mechanical technologies when the University of California at Davis developed the field harvester for processing tomatoes just in time for the labor crisis of the 1960s. The process from the initial vision to complete commercial acceptance and utilization took over 2 decades in order to design, build the harvester, and the plant breeding involved to develop a tomato suited to mechanical harvesting. We no longer have the luxury to wait decades for similar innovations. Significant investment in plant breeding, mechanical engineering, and broadband is required today. The University of California has estimated an investment of $10 to $20 million will be needed to research and develop critical technologies for each of the specialty crops. Several examples of advanced mechanization already underway. Olive growers have been challenged by labor shortages for a crop that can only be hand-picked. They have allocated hundreds of thousands of dollars over decades toward developing mechanical harvesting tools to assist the industry with labor-saving options. Grimway Farms is exploring a concept of utilizing robots and planting in pots, moving the pots to the field, and then returning the pots to a central location to harvest, relieving the need for hand crews. Ongoing research and design of robotic strawberry and lettuce pickers are still years from being field ready, which has resulted in the production of these and other labor-intensive crops being relocated to other countries. There are many reasons for optimism as we look to the future, but we must also be realistic. The challenges facing the agricultural foundation of our country are real, and standing pat is not an option. The specialty crops, by virtue of their limited relative acres and scope, high input costs, and vulnerability to foreign competition, are lacking the same safety net afforded to other growers. Ronald Reagan, governor of California and past president, once said about government and business, if it moves, tax it. If it keeps moving, regulate it. When it stops moving, subsidize it. Mr. Chairman, as your committee confronts the funding challenges as you develop a new and improved farm bill, I would ask that you would seek to include novel innovations that would leverage the investment of the American taxpayer. Public-private partnerships and developing and installing critical infrastructure that allows rural America the same access to critical communication capabilities, and regulatory reform, looking for opportunities to develop, implement, and realize benefits from creative new technologies and innovations as we seek to provide food and agricultural products for a growing world population. Unfortunately, overly zealous regulations often limit, discourage, and prevent the American ingenuity that has helped us be the most productive farmers in the world. We look forward to working with you to protect, promote, and advance the critical foundation to the United States called agriculture.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Heller, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Conaway, Ranking Member Peterson, and other members of the committee. I thank everyone here today for the opportunity to come before you to discuss the critical role Farm Bill funding plays in the continued success of the specialty crop industry, citrus in particular. My name is Paul Heler. I'm the Vice President of Wonderful Citrus's Texas Division. Wonderful Citrus is the largest vertically integrated grower, packer, and shipper of fresh citrus in the United States. In connection with our grower partners, we farm and process nearly 60,000 acres of fresh citrus varietals throughout Texas, California, and Mexico, including Texas red grapefruit from the Rio Grande Valley. I'm also here representing thousands of small growers who make up the backbone of our industry, myself proudly one of them. The Farm Bill has been instrumental in maintaining the health of the specialty crop industry. Among the most critical are crop insurance and the specialty crop provisions, which include programs to respond to pest and disease issues. While I only briefly touch on a few key points here today, I wanted to stress just how critical it is for these programs to continue under the 2018 Farm Bill. Farming is an inherently risky business, as you all know, and tree crops like citrus can carry an even greater risk as they require multiple years of growth to reach fruit-bearing maturity. Unlike annual row crops, citrus trees cannot simply be removed from the ground in order to wait out a natural disaster. As such, the Farm Bill's crop insurance programs have become a vital risk management tool for specialty crop producers. For example, South Texas was hit especially hard by tree-killing freezes in 1983 and again in 1989. The primary reason the industry was able to bounce back after these events is because of the protections provided by crop insurance and the resilience and foresight of the growers that participate in these newly developed insurance programs. Today, growers still depend on the stability of crop insurance and make serious business decisions based upon these programs. It is absolutely critical that these programs continue to receive the support they need from Congress. Having some protections against unforeseen disasters is extremely important to growers. However, learning how to mitigate these catastrophes are key. As such, pest and disease issues remain a key priority for Wonderful and the citrus industry at large. This is especially true as we continue to fight the devastating disease known as citrus greening, or Wanlong bean, also known as HOB. With no known cure for HOB, it is absolutely necessary that the citrus industry take every possible precaution to prevent the spread of the disease while continuing to search for a treatment protocol. The federal government has been a crucial partner in this fight. Citrus industry has been fortunate to have the support of the pest and disease research programs in the Farm Bill, like USDA's Citrus Health Response Program, which has proven instrumental in the battle against not only HOB, but fruit flies, canker, and other issues that have come up. One of the most important aspects of the Farm Bill overall is industry's ability to leverage public-private partnerships to bring innovation and technology into our businesses. For example, red grapefruit, the basis of our grapefruit industry in Texas, was discovered as a natural mutation on a pink grapefruit tree. It wasn't until the 1970s, through innovative work of researchers like Dr. Richard Hentz at Texas A&I Kingsville Citrus Center, where new varieties of red grapefruit were developed that are the basis of our industry today. This work was made possible in part through federal funding for the Research Center and a successful partnership between growers, industry, and other government institutions. Today, Dr. Eliezer Lozada is continuing this research using advanced biotechnology techniques and plant cell and tissue culture. The Citrus Center that we depend on today is a lasting example of these partnerships and the benefits they bring to specialty crop producers. While advances in technology have historically been made on the production side of the citrus business, such as fruit sizing and sorting, our Texas operation used advanced technologies in many ways. For instance, we are currently piloting new technology that grades the amount of decay that is present on individual pieces of fruit. We also have started using high-resolution surveys of our orchards to count for missing trees and are looking at ways to advance that technology to conduct surveys for pest and disease. There are numerous benefits to bolstering public-private partnerships, especially in research and development. The next Farm Bill should promote these types of relationships and leverage the knowledge and inspiration of the private sector to move the needle on innovative farming practices in the United States. Once again, I'd like to thank the committee for inviting me to testify before you today on the priorities for the citrus industry in the next Farm Bill. I'm happy to answer any questions at a later time.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Wishnatzki for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Conaway, Ranking Member Peterson, members of the committee, and a special note of appreciation to our 4 distinguished members from Florida. I thank all of you for your efforts to strengthen agriculture throughout our nation. I'm Gary Wishnatzki, owner of Wish Farms. My family has been marketing berries for family farms since 1922, and since 1987, we've also been farming. As a 4th-generation family company, I'm proud of our family's legacy of producing strawberries and blueberries. I'm also co-founder of Harvest Crew Robotics, a startup to develop harvest technology. It is a collaborative effort with 8 other strawberry companies, both from Florida and California, have invested. I serve on the executive board of Florida Fruit and Vegetable Association, the board of the Produce Marketing Association, and I am a member of United Fresh Produce Association, as well as the Florida Strawberry Growers Association. As the chairman has acknowledged, specialty crop production is a pivotal and growing sector of agricultural industry. Toward that end, innovation and technology are essential for farmers to continue producing more food for our nation. In recent years, the industry, as well as others in the specialty crop sector, have been facing serious challenges. Most growers will agree that the availability of labor is the greatest of these challenges. I believe an impending crisis is at hand. Innovation can play a key role in solving this. The primary reason for the shrinking labor supply is simple demographics. The majority of farm workers come from other countries, particularly Mexico. In the 1960s, the fertility rate in Mexico was 6.7. People were coming here because there were no opportunities for them at home. 20 years ago, it had dropped to 2.9. That shrinking birth rate mirrors the declining labor force. The current fertility rate in Mexico is near 2.1. There are more opportunities for workers to stay in Mexico. The Pew Research Center published a paper in 2015 that concluded there are more people going back to Mexico than are coming to the U.S. Our workforce is shrinking and aging. According to a University of Florida economic study, the total cost of producing strawberries in Florida had risen 30% over a 5-year period ending in 2015. Labor costs were estimated at $8,400 per acre, while the cost of labor production for Mexican growers was a mere $3,800 per acre. The study concluded, quote, "These challenges are not likely to narrow down in the foreseeable future without a major technological breakthrough such as mechanization of strawberry harvesting." This study was based on industry costs from 2 seasons ago. Our farm's labor cost this past season was over $13,000 per acre. Many of the current Farm Bill programs provide the tools to enhance innovation and technology. However, there's a greater role for the private sector to play, and I encourage the adoption of policies that recognize and enhance private industry's involvement in vital research and Farm Bill programs. Currently in Florida, there is no private access to agricultural research funds. We will eventually harvest a significant portion of our nation's fruits and vegetables using automation, but depending on the crop, it may take between 5 and 10 years for technology to be perfected to the point that they can be utilized on a large scale. Until that time, our industry has to rely on foreign labor. The current federal guest worker program, H-2A, has serious problems. The program is in need of a major overhaul, and I believe there's a very simple way to fix it. To be clear, employers in our industry support enforcement of our nation's immigration policies, but those policies must reflect the reality of how vital a foreign-born workforce is to our nation's ability to ensure an abundant supply of fresh fruits and vegetables. Innovation will be the key to maintaining our nation's ability to feed itself, and this committee should fight for investments in technology and research for the specialty crop sector. Please consider, though, that automation is a long-range solution, and we still depend on foreign workers to bridge the gap. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Murphy, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Peterson, and members of the committee for this opportunity to appear before you. I'm Kevin Murphy, the Chief Executive Officer of Driscoll's. Driscoll's is a family-owned company headquartered in California that markets fresh strawberries, raspberries, blueberries, and blackberries that independent family farmers produce using Driscoll's patented berry varieties. In addition to California, we have growers in Washington, Oregon, Florida, New Jersey, and Georgia. With over 25 years in the produce industry, I'm honored to address the topic of technology and innovation in specialty crops. I have been very fortunate that my career spanned both the fruit and vegetable industries, and more importantly, given the companies that I've worked for, I've been at the heart of much of the innovation during this time period. This Farm Bill comes at a critical time for U.S. specialty crops. As we scan ahead, there are 5 very powerful forces at play that will have a profound impact on our existing methods of production. Firstly, there's too much food waste in the system. Roughly 30% of all berries produced are not consumed. This waste throughout the supply chain is unacceptable, and we will need new thinking and innovation to resolve. Secondly, the effects of climate change coupled with diminishing availability of key resources. Lack of water and labor are the largest issues facing the industry today and are the primary drivers of the need for technology and innovation. Sustained drought conditions make more efficient use of water an absolute necessity, while the lack of farm labor threatens the very future of our industry. Thirdly, the push to eliminate fumigants and pesticides driven by societal and consumer concerns will require, if these tools are eliminated, different forms of production. Fourthly, food safety issues related to food products grown close to the soil continues to impact consumer confidence. And finally, new technologies already in use in adjacent industries are migrating to agriculture and will impact future methods of production. The results of all these forces will be a move towards a more controlled and automated environments. This will require technology and innovation at a pace and scale unseen in our industry to date. The question, in my opinion, is not if this will happen, but when and how. I believe the next Farm Bill should prioritize research that addresses these issues with a special emphasis on water and labor. To this end, I applaud the formation of the Congressional Agricultural Research Caucus that Representatives Davis and Panetta, my home congressman, have formed and led. As a way of example, I offer some illustrations of the innovation we're working on at the company to resolve or lessen the impact of some of these key issues facing the industry. Increasingly, we'll grow our berries in containers rather than directly in the soil. These container techniques are common in Europe and are quickly coming here. Tabletops will allow harvesters to pick strawberries standing up, an innovation that is good both for the farmer and the farm worker. Our hope is this will attract a larger pool of available workers. We are also exploring, with the help of others such as Wish Farms, mechanized harvesting, where visual systems identify when a berry is ready to be picked, and then a mechanized arm snips the fruit and gently moves it from the field to inspection and packaging. Advances in visual systems are making mechanized harvesting a reality in the berry industry. We are addressing water shortages. Nearly 10 years ago, our community recognized that without significant change, saltwater intrusion into our aquifers along the Pacific coast would worsen to the point that we would no longer grow in areas ideal for berry production. This intrusion was caused by overdrafting of the aquifer. We worked with various stakeholders from different industries and backgrounds to develop a plan that would restore balance to the aquifer. The plan involves improved irrigation systems, recharge capabilities, well monitoring, and continued dialogue around further opportunities. Use of and the learning from organic farming techniques to reduce our dependency on pesticides and fumigants in both farming and plant nursery practices. And then finally, as a community-based business, we look to bring innovation to our communities. Innovation here takes different forms, but is no less important. As an example, Driscoll's, along with our local Agricultural Leadership Council, funded translation services for farm workers who speak indigenous languages. Others are creating innovative housing solutions, daycare, and health clinics. Driscoll's recognize that these challenges are larger than any one company. Simply put, the size of the issues we confront demand a different and more collaborative approach. We have invested in technology accelerators, and within agriculture as a whole, ag tech investment has doubled over the last 3 years. From new production techniques to packaging to better connecting farmers and consumers, the future will be very different from the past. Driscoll's has been in business for over 100 years and has been built on a foundation of innovation. We plan on continuing on this path as we believe it provides us with a competitive advantage. Not surprisingly, I believe this is also true for all U.S. agriculture as we try and maintain our leadership position on the world stage. The Farm Bill will play a critical role in making this happen. As this committee drafts the next Farm Bill, it must carefully consider how to accelerate innovation in light of the existing efforts of the private sector. We cannot afford to have our efforts slowed by well-intended but bureaucratic solutions that result in less investment and less innovation. The challenges are too great and the imperatives too near. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today.
Thank you, sir. And Mr. LaVine, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Conaway, Ranking Member Peterson, and members of the House Agriculture Committee. It's my pleasure to provide this testimony today on behalf of the American Seed Trade Association and our partners in America's land-grant institution and USDA's research community. ASTA's diverse membership consists of over 700 companies involved in seed production, distribution, plant breeding, research, and related industries in North America. As our knowledge of plant genetics and biology has grown, breeders have gained access to new tools, technologies, methods, and strategies to more efficiently address evolving farmer and environmental challenges and to meet ever-changing consumer demand. Today, breeders use an array of tools such as whole genome sequencing, bioinformatics, molecular marker techniques, and digital imaging, which allow them to improve plants more efficiently than ever before. Through evolving and innovative plant breeding methods like gene editing, we can develop new plant varieties without incorporating DNA from outside the plant's family, allowing us to reach the same endpoint as traditional breeding, but in a more precise and targeted manner. Breeders are able to maximize the unique, novel characteristics that are part of a plant's own family. While no gene-edited products are available in the marketplace today, this breeding method, as well as future innovations in plant breeding, represents exciting opportunities for agriculture. This is especially true in the specialty crops arena, where scientists are currently researching gene editing methods to address costly diseases in crops like citrus, potatoes, grapes, lettuce, and others. Federally funded agricultural research has played an important role in expanding our understanding of plant genetics, leading to new crop varieties, and it's important that the next Farm Bill maintains robust funding for that continued research. USDA investments in gene sequencing of more than 25 agriculturally significant crops, many of those specialty crops, are fundamental to this work. Typically, this research is done in cooperation with partnerships with USDA, universities, and industry researchers. Some of the other examples of research that's ongoing now in the specialty crop arena is the work being performed by Dr. Richard Mitchell-Moore at the University of California, Davis, where he's focused on enhancing the efficiency of lettuce production. USDA's National Institute of Food and Agriculture contributed to his work through the Agriculture and Food Research Initiative, and it is further supported by the Lettuce Genome Sequencing Consortium. The investment by this private sector group, comprised of 10 vegetable seed companies in California, is allowing Mitchell-Moore and his team to expand the scope of the project. In 2016, AFRI funded a project at the Cold Spring Harbor Laboratories in New York, focused on improving growth and yield in tomatoes. Led by Dr. Zach Lippman, researchers isolated genes responsible for characteristics that can diminish yield in tomatoes. By using CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing tools, the team was able to develop tomato plants without those negative characteristics and maintaining the plant's desired characteristics. And at Cornell University, Dr. Thomas Bjorkman is using marker-assisted plant breeding techniques to develop new broccoli varieties that are better suited for production on the East Coast. This initiative is supported by several ASTA member companies in the Farm Bill Specialty Crop Research Initiative. Several varieties have already been developed in this program and have been released to the marketplace. Finally, the Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research, which was authorized in the 2014 Farm Bill, announced just recently the creation of the Crops for Future Collaborative Research Initiative with 8 partners. This project will leverage a $10 million federal investment in pre-competitive research to hasten yield and nutrition gains in leafy greens, wheat, and corn. It's clear that research in modern plant breeding requires sustained and long-term funding for ARS and for our academic community through the NIFA programs. However, the promise of these research investments will only be fully realized if federal policies foster a climate of continued innovation. Overly burdensome policies around gene editing and other evolving plant breeding methods would likely limit their use to large row crops and preclude smaller companies and public sector researchers from benefiting from the use of these methods. We urge Congress to encourage USDA, FDA, and EPA to have consistent science-based policies that promote innovation so that everyone can benefit from emerging innovations like gene editing in our future plant breeding techniques. In addition to domestic efforts, it's important that the U.S. government develops an international engagement strategy to communicate with our trading partners in order to prevent trade barriers due to non-harmonized regulations. Mr. Chairman, member of the committees, this is truly a monumental time for the plant breeding sciences, monumental time for the plant sciences, and it is our hope that the administration, Congress, the research community, and the public at large have the opportunity to benefit from the knowledge and breeding methods that have been evolving since before the time of Gregor Mendel. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I look forward to answering any questions.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much for your testimony this morning. The Chair will remind members that they'll be recognized for questioning in the order of seniority for members who were here at the start of the hearing. After that, members will be recognized in order of arrival. I appreciate our members' understanding. And with that, I'm going to recognize one of the freshmen to go first. That rarely happens in this arena. So, Mr. Dunn, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your innovative order of questioning. Mr. LaVine, your testimony discussed a number of commodities which have seen enormous benefits with the use of innovative agricultural techniques such as gene editing. And you cited benefits to crop yields, nutritional qualities, and all these things benefit the farmers, the consumers, the retailers, and the processors. What other ways can Congress help you get these innovative techniques and use them to the benefit of all of us?
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. As we look at the evolving biology and understanding of plant nature today and the ability to take the characteristics that are favorable to growers' production practices, whether it's for flavor or taste or size, or whether it's for disease resistance or pest resistance, The ability to have a sound policy in the U.S. with respect to plant breeding today is absolutely critical for these tools to be able to be used down through the specialty crop arena. Today, unfortunately, transgenics are not used in the specialty crop arena. They're only used in large row crops. That ship has sailed with respect to technology being able to move into that arena. As we look at gene editing tools or techniques, and we look at these methods that will continue to evolve because we better understand plants and the nature of what they have within their plant family, we've got to be able to use those capabilities within the specialty crop arena. As you heard today, the pressure on pest and disease is huge, and the ability to create resistance within a plant's family is a great opportunity. So that policy has to come from this administration and hopefully USDA.
Can you help us target specific regulations that are burdensome to your association members?
Yes, we can. We can, and we're working on that in a couple of arenas with respect to Part 340 reform, as well as we look at plant breeding methods.
We'll be calling on you for some help in that area. One last question, Mr. LaVine. GMOs have had a perception problem in the public in recent years. I'd like to know what your association, your members are doing, and what could Congress do to help?
Well, yes, unfortunately, the GMO
Speaking of science-based things.
Yeah. The GMO transgenic industry, we have received quite a black eye as that has evolved, and I think a lot of the misperception. There's overwhelming evidence and scientific proof that shows it's safe and everything and good for production. We've seen that throughout the Midwest and in many other countries. As we look at it, our focus is going to be on education and working with the ag and food value chain. How do we talk about plant breeding? And unfortunately, hopefully no offense to anyone in the room, but as we found out in talking to the publics, a lot of people took one genetics class in college, and if they passed it and didn't drop it, if they passed it, they didn't take another genetics class, human, animal, or plant. And so we have an uphill road just to talk about the plant breeding methods we use today, let alone that evolution of understanding of the plant physiology for tomorrow's plant breeding methods. So we've got an extensive education program in place working with many of the people at this table, as well as all the way through the grocery chain, to try and educate the public and the food chain.
So I hope we can join hands and accomplish that. So with the minute or so remaining to us, Mr. Wishnatzki, you said that you think it's easy to fix the H2A system. Please enlighten us.
I'm glad you asked me that question.
I'm ready to take notes.
Yeah, please do, because I believe it could be a very simple fix if folks would get together and understand what growers need. We don't need indentured servants like H2A is now. It's akin to that. We need transportable visas that workers can move from grower to grower as needed. So, and I outlined it pretty clearly, very briefly in my written testimony, so you can read that. But the centerpiece to my idea of how simple it is if you tied a heavy withholding amount to these workers, when they came here and did agricultural work, they would not receive that back to them until they returned to their home country. To me, it's very simple. It's just, they're going to go back because you've got golden handcuffs on them.
When we go back to Florida, you and I will speak some more. Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman's back. Mr. Peterson, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's see, for Mr. Winger or Mr. Murphy, or I guess anybody else who wants to weigh in. Mechanization, can address some of the farm labor issues, but as I understand it, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. And there are some crops that are better suited than others, and I guess like avocados, I'm told, must be picked by hand. And it's estimated that foreign-born labor is nearly three-quarters of the hired labor force on America's farms, and some people argue that Americans should do these jobs. Others argue that foreign labor enables us to produce more specialty crops here, and that it in turn creates more jobs for Americans. So what is your take on this?
Well, I'll start out, since we just went through last year a very vociferous debate on the minimum wage and the overtime. California, we had a 10-hour workday, 6 days a week. overtime after 10 hours in a day and on the 7th day. And we're going to be going now by 2022 to 40-hour work week, 5 days a week, so 8 hours a day. Agriculture doesn't know weather. Agriculture knows weather, a time clock doesn't. It was very interesting. We went through the debate, Mr. Peterson, some of the folks that ended up voting for the overtime bill were talking to field workers. They were talking what they were getting paid. They were getting paid $18 an hour, this one particular worker, and they said, what would you get in Mexico? He said $18 a day. And so as you look to the larger buyers of our products, they're going to look to source it at the cheapest place they can, and that's going to be in Mexico. They don't have the labor standards, they don't have the wage standards, they don't have the worker protections. And I would also say a lot of our growers are in Mexico, and so I know that those abide by the food safety standards that we have here, but many other imported areas don't. But we raise our kids to go to college and get educated so they can, get higher paying jobs. And they all want fresh strawberries on their plate, they just don't want to pick them. And they're not going to pick them at any wage. They're not going to pick them at $40 an hour. And that's just the way it is. And so we know, as we've heard in the prior testimony, that there is an aging in Mexico. Mostly we've looked for immigrant labor, for folks that are trying to climb that economic ladder, and they've done it quite successfully by coming here and utilizing agriculture in the United States, particularly California. But that is going to be aging out, so we've got to look to the robotics, we've got to look to those other things, and you're right, all the peaches, apricots, avocados, strawberries, all the soft fruits, we've got to look to ways that a robot can pick that product at the peak point of ripeness where it's not overly ripe, but that it's good enough so that the consumer will have a flavorful product, but it's going to be technology.
To add to that, I think there's really 4 things we need to do, quite simply. Firstly, we have to definitely go down the automated route, look for mechanization as best as we possibly can, but that is going to be a 5 to 10 year view. Secondly, I think we have to look to streamline the H-2A program in a way that makes it easier to execute upon and simpler. The numbers need to grow. About 5% of our workforce right now is through H-2A. Because of what Mr. Wishnatzki talked about, that could grow. We would need maybe 50% of that workforce to be through H-2A, so that's a big deal. Then I think the third element is really this one around the whole idea of creating legal status for the workers that are here. Many of them have been here a long time. In my opinion, and from what I've spoken to, most of them do not want to become citizens, but they do want to have some legal status that allows them to work here. And I think then the last thing is what we're talking about here today is the collaboration between private industry and government working hand in hand to come up with creative solutions.
Well, thank you. And, I'm not an expert on H-2A, but I've worked through it in some other instances, not necessarily agriculture. And that bureaucracy is horrendous. And I tell you, I am skeptical that you're going to be able to get a program at the end of the day through the United States government that's workable. By the time they get done with it, they're going to screw this up, I think. So my idea is, let you guys do this. If somebody's working for you, they have a job, they're not causing any trouble, they're not in jail, they can be here and they can work. But there's no citizenship, there's none of that. When they're done working, they go back home. It's just too simple, but that's what needs to be done, I think.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
I think we need you to advocate for us. I know that some of the decisions are not made here in this committee, but in other committees. But we would respectfully ask that you help us in this endeavor. And
I'm there. We'll get some more, huh? Thank you.
Well, our colleague Bob Goodlatte is working to fix that, and we're in conversations with him. Mr. Austin Scott, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. LaVine, as you were talking about the perception, I was reminded of a few years ago that my wife and I were at a class before our little girl was born, and I listened to the nurse at the front of the room talk about how bad biotechnology was in agriculture and how good it was in healthcare. And certainly the perception, the GMO, it sounds like you're going to become a zombie if you eat something where in the end it's biotechnology. And so interested in your thoughts on how you intend to change the perception. Obviously, people would be paying a tremendous amount more for food today, not only in the U.S. but around the world. And quite honestly, I think that biotechnology is one of the ways that we're going to help eliminate starvation around the world. And so what ideas do you have about how you're going to change the perception of the use of biotechnology in agriculture?
Well, Congressman Scott, you're exactly right. I think one of the things that we did early on with biotechnology and what we're trying to learn from in that arena is we based everything on science. Trust us, the science says it's okay, it's good, all of those things. And it's something that we're dealing with. I would say it's not just within biotechnology, it's within agriculture in general. There's a perception of this bucolic lifestyle on the farm, and it still should be 40 acres and a mule instead of how agriculture has evolved because of innovation. And biotechnology was the first one out there that really got the focus. And our efforts here as we talk about plant breeding is how are we as transparent as possible? Let's talk about breeding. Let's talk about the solution that plant breeder is trying to find. Biotechnology will be a part of tools like or methods like gene editing. You'll be able to create new transgenics using those methods. But we'll also be able to create new methods, new varieties using these methods that could be disease resistant or resistant to pest or have a longer shelf life or help even in the mechanization issues as we did with tomatoes in the early 70s, I believe. So there's where we have to get the message out that this is nothing new. We know more and more about plant physiology today to be able to target those characteristics that are naturally occurring in that plant's family.
Well, it's extremely important, especially the ability to grow crops in different areas as the seed becomes more drought resistant and requires less water, less pesticide, less other things. It's extremely important to the environment. And the facts are, if you look at the science, there's no discussion to be had. This is an emotional argument that's not based on the facts in any way, shape, or form. Mr. Winger, you mentioned in your testimony olives and olive oil. That's something that many Georgia farmers are using now to diversify their crop. I was surprised to find out that the grading standard on olive oils, it took 62 years to upgrade that standard, and yet approximately 50% of the U.S. olive oil sold, 50% of the olive oil sold in the United States does not meet the grading standard. Is that still the case today? And any suggestions on how we make sure that the consumer knows that what they're buying on the label isn't necessarily what they're getting?
Yeah, it's been a real issue, and I know the olive oil growers, they're now setting up standards that they can work with, but 96% of the olive oil consumed in the United States is imported. So there's a huge growth curve for domestically produced olive oil, but again, a lot of folks don't know what's in that bottle. Mislabeling has been a very real issue and continues to be an issue. And so that's why I think through the Farm Bill, really promoting domestically produced olive oil, and that what's in that bottle is what you're getting. That is clearly the direction we need to go.
It is. We tried to address this in the last Farm Bill, and unfortunately we lost. But it's not so much just promoting. It's not so much promoting U.S. grown olives or olive oil from U.S. grown olives. It's that what is imported and put on the shelves is labeled at the same standard that the U.S. is labeled at. And so I certainly know I would appreciate your input and your support as we go forward in the next Farm Bill to make sure that if somebody is selling what is labeled as extra virgin olive oil, it actually is extra virgin olive oil if it's purchased off a shelf in the United States.
We can definitely get you more information. I know Jamie Johansson, my first vice president, is an first generation olive oil grower in California, and so we can get you some more information.
Well, gentlemen, thank you for your testimony. And Mr. Wishnatzki, I wish it was as simple as you put it. Unfortunately, there are 535 people up here that think they're the best chef in the kitchen. So, gentlemen, thank you for your time and your testimony.
Jim's time expired. Mr. David Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In my state of Georgia, specialty crops come up to about $2 billion annually in terms of the farm gate value. So it's very important. We got peaches, watermelons, blueberries, pecans, peanuts, onions, you name it. I agree with you, Mr. Wishnatzki. Did I do that okay? All right? All right.
Yes.
This is a crisis. It's a serious crisis. And you mentioned those three things. You mentioned climate, water, and labor. Each of these up here, as we're dealing in Congress, sometimes get us into knots. So I think the real answer is going to come from you all. Let me ask you if you could give the committee some examples of how and what type of mechanization will be able to go in, pick blueberries, pick watermelons, be able to know when they're ripe. Describe what you're talking about. Give us a look into the future and explain how the differentiation, how we can make this happen.
Sure.
How do we get them to pick those peaches without squeezing them to death? Go ahead.
Well, it's a great time in history right now. We're kind of at this crux here where, there's this tremendous need for automation, and at the same time, the technology is coming of age that we can do this. I want to qualify what I'm saying by I'm not the engineer in this company. I tell people in Harvest Crew Robotics, I'm simply some of the funding and the inspiration behind it, but I do know enough to be maybe dangerous. But the one thing about the technology that's changed dramatically, just in the last 5 years, is the processing power of computer chips. We are doing things on little small NVIDIA chips that would have taken massive computers not too long ago. The stereo vision that we're using to identify and go down and pick the fruit at the exact point where it is on the ground, that technology just didn't exist until very recently. So we're processing something like 30 gigabytes of data a second. And we're processing these images in 10 milliseconds, 10 one-thousandths of a second. So we're able now to identify the fruit. We have a system with these soft claws that are on this picking wheel that my co-founder developed and we've patented. That is what's allowing us to get to commercial speed, and it's allowing us to travel around the plant, inspect it very quickly, and go down, dive down, and pick the fruit. So it's some groundbreaking stuff. On our website, we've got some information about it if you go to that, and some videos also that show how it actually works.
And so if we just took one like blueberries, give us a picture of how that would look in the blueberry field. What would that robot look like? And secondly, at some point, the human quotient has to come in there. I mean, you pick them, you got to get them up, you got to put them in something, you got to transport. Where does that start? Where does it end? And where does the human quotient come in?
Sure, those are good questions because, we're focused on harvesting of strawberries right now, but I know blueberries will be in our future.
Well, let's use strawberries, yeah.
Okay, strawberries is an example. Well, one of the things my co-founder, Bob Pitzer, has mentioned is, there's a couple problems here. You've got to be able to find them and pick them, but you've also got to be able to transport them out of the field. So you need a vehicle that these robots are mounted underneath that's of enough size and mass that you can actually put the finished product on and stack it until you get out to the ends of the rows. And when we do have that, we've developing it, and we've got the autonomous system on it now. It's driving using GPS and collision avoidance using LiDAR technology. So this is just a big platform that has 16 robotic picking heads mounted underneath it as this swarm of robots that'll be traveling through the fields, picking the berries, and then dropping them off at the end of the rows. We don't have a our plan is not to utilize human labor to pack it either. There would be a secondary inspection of the fruit that would actually, after the berries were picked, they would be inspected by another set of cameras that would then actually have robotic fingers that would put it into clamshells, or probably maybe not clamshells, but a consumer unit, and that will be transported to the end of the field.
Thank you.
Jim's time has expired. Mr. Crawford, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to kind of continue on with the topic that my colleague, Mr. Austin Scott, broached, and that is how we communicate the value of genetically modified crops. In the row crop industry, I think, it's become a volatile issue, and most notably, Roundup Ready technology, things like that, the consumer doesn't necessarily understand. But to all of you, what would you suggest in terms of communicating the value to the consumer? Because I think we can get into all the technicals, which you did, Mr. LaVine, and I appreciate that. But the consumers without a science background are making a decision based on an emotional response on some information that's out there in the marketplace. Can y'all weigh in on that? What can be done sort of collectively to soften the blow that has really, I think, been harmful to you?
Well, I'll take a first stab at it. I think when some of these technologies, most of this technology is being used in research on humans and animals right now. I think when some of this technology really creates tremendous value around fighting disease and some of these other issues in humans, I think it will turn. I believe that once the public sees the great value in some of these tools, its perception will change, but it will take time and education. We as an industry need to do a better job of talking about it in the right terms and sort of more consumer-friendly terms. But I think the progress that some of these technologies like CRISPR-9 will have on human fighting, things like Alzheimer's and other stuff like that will get a lot of publicity, and ultimately that will start to lessen the blow. The problem is it takes many years and time, but this technology is here. It's not going away.
I think it's my observation, having worked in the ag industry for a long time and been an ag communicator, that the ag industry tends to be reactive, and they wait for a consumer perception to occur and then respond. So I guess what I'm looking for from the ag industry, and particularly I think from y'all from specialty crop perspective, is how do we blunt that? How do we get out there in advance and paint this picture of what's coming and prepare the consumers for the good that they can expect from this, as opposed to waiting for the attacks?
I think that's a very good point. I'll just add a thought to that. I think part of it is education of what crop breeding is and what's happened historically, how these crops that we have today came about. They're through natural mutations. This is just another tool, a more precise tool, in order to improve crops, in order to feed the world. So I think that part of it is educating people that this has occurred throughout history. This is why we're different than our forebears. And that fundamental understanding should help provide a foundation so we can convince people or have people accept different methods of plant breeding that are necessary.
Go ahead.
Yes, it's my understanding that CRISPR-Cas9 is not a requirement to be even labeled as a GMO currently. And the reason for that, they're taking genes, and Mr. LaVine can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but they're taking genes from within the same species. In other words, we're not taking a fish gene and putting it in a strawberry or a tomato. They're developing varieties, And I prefer to call it smart hybridization, because hybridization has been around for many years, and that's how we cross everything, but it's all just trial and error. But with this smart hybridization, you're able to get a variety that's close, but maybe it's got one little defect of susceptibility to a disease. So they can snip that bad gene out, put in a good gene from another, say if we're talking about strawberries, so it's within the same species. You're not taking something else. So
But
it's
what,
just
what this conversation we're having right now, which I find fascinating, but the consumers, you're scaring.
I agree.
And that's my whole point, is that we have to stop using the term genetically modified organism is a scary sound. It's very sciencey. It instills sort of a fear in the consumer. So how do we, I guess, I would say a mule is a good example of a GMO. Somebody mentioned the bucolic picture of farming 40 acres and a mule. Yeah, they've been around a long, long time. But how do we overcome that negative association? And the science sometimes doesn't help us in that regard.
Yeah,
If I could just add something real quick. I just spoke to the bio conference, and you're right, with CRISPR, we're doing it all over again because we're telling everybody what's good for them. And they think there's a profit motivation in that. And they don't trust us, so we've got to bring other people into the tent. We've got to ask them what their concerns are, and we've got to address those concerns early on.
And my time's run out, but I want to help you in every way I can in that regard. I'll yield back.
Gentleman's time expired. Lisa Blunt, Rochester, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank the panel. I want to shift gears a little bit and go back to the conversation about people. Mr. Murphy, I think you mentioned that automation is a long-range solution, but you're still really relying on workers. And Mr. Wishnatzki, in your written testimony, you said that the jobs that Americans do not want to do have been filled by newly arrived immigrants, and since it is only the newcomers that are willing to do the hard jobs. But however, you also mentioned that a lot of your workers are moving on to other occupations. So the first question, and also we talked about demographic shifts as well, aging population as well as less people. So I'm curious about retention. What kind of strategies do any of you use for retention of your employees, if we can start there, and then also if you could talk about turnover rates, like what kind of turnover rates you actually see.
So I think obviously keeping the diminishing workforce we have is really important. So I think you're seeing a lot of farmers start to work closer with their workers around areas that are important to them. So for example, childcare, providing clinics. At our company, we provide clinics for some of the farm workers. So there's a lot of extended services that we are beginning to provide them that perhaps we didn't do in the past. And I think that's becoming increasingly more important. Wages, of course, are increasing. Another thing that we have begun to work on, but it will take a while, is, as I mentioned in my testimony, is we're beginning to try and make it easier for people to pick strawberries, for example. Strawberries are on the ground. You have to bend over. It's one of the hardest jobs you can imagine. So by putting them on what we call tabletops and raising them, people wouldn't have to bend over. It might be easier under tunnels and systems that will make it more attractive for those people that are there and potentially attract new people to the industry. So as others have mentioned, a lot of people working in ag, even though it's backbreaking work in California, do make a good wage, way above minimum wage. They work very hard for it, but they do make that wage. So it's not that the wage rate is wrong, it's just that the work is so tough. So the strategies, certainly in our company and others, is to make it as easy for them to pick as possible, provide alternative opportunities beyond just wage rate to keep them in play.
Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Rochester. Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, I just want to add.
Trouble with each other's names.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just want to add, picking strawberries and many other harvesting jobs in agriculture, it's not a young person's game. And so we don't have the young people coming up in this country. We're not raising our children to become pickers. I mean, quite frankly, we're educating them. We've set up scholarship funds for our folks, and both in California and in Florida, we have scholarship funds. So our workers have access to education, higher education, and our workers' kids are not. Chances are they're not going to be strawberry pickers. So where are these people going to come from if we don't have some sort of means to have guest workers? It's a viable system for the industry.
I was just curious, when you gave your testimony earlier, you also mentioned the child care, you mentioned the health care, you mentioned housing even. Is this the norm, or is that unusual?
No, it's becoming, certainly in California, it's becoming much more of an important factor in attracting that limited workforce, right? To the extent that you can provide them with housing. There's a vegetable grower in Salinas that's done a really interesting job with housing, and they've created a really sort of prototype for the rest of us to follow in some ways. So I think you're going to see more and more of this as a way to not only attract workers within the existing community, but also bring people from the outside.
Great. Anyone else want to share on workers and just the recruitment and retention and keeping them?
Well, just one of the problems with the seasonal crops, and it's one thing when you have a larger operation where you can keep year-round employment. And so you can have the housing, you can have those workers for the daycare. It's others where you have smaller farmers that have 20, 40 acres of peaches, and they need large numbers of people for thinning. They don't need anybody, again, for quite a while, except there are 2 or 3 people that work with them. Then they need large numbers to pick that fruit. And so those are more migrant, and they need to have more portability going from farm to farm. Hard to provide the health care and those other amenities that you can do for a year-round workforce.
Great. Thank you.
Jill Lady's time expired. Ms. Lamoffett, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to our panelists, especially our Californians who have to fly the farthest, and hope you didn't get caught in that air traffic situation that was going on here a day or 2 ago. So thank you for that. Good working with you as well. The issue with California, we have obviously, as Mr. Wenger laid out, a very, very diverse set of crops. For the leader in the vast majority of the, maybe the non-commodity or non-high volume ones in the state. You mentioned almonds and so many fresh crops and others. So yeah, a lot of them are labor intensive. And when we talk about further mechanization and newer technology, I've lived that myself as a rice grower. We're not so labor intensive, but even in the late 70s and 80s, I got more hours than you want to know about on a laser leveling machine, flattening those rice fields. And now we're up to GPS. We can not only flatten the field within 1/8 of an inch, but we can do it taking into account the curvature of the earth. So pretty amazing. Monitor technology for the grain coming in, as well as the yield in the harvester, and later using that to apply fertilizer as is needed. So we got some great stuff going, but we need to keep going because, as the panel keeps talking about with labor, where's the labor supply going to come from? So it isn't completely elimination of labor, but it's the mixture, the percentage of labor versus further mechanization. We've seen this in tomato picking, where they can kick out the green ones, even the green grains of rice. So when we're looking at the mechanization, if we had all the workforce we needed, Mr. Wenger, do you believe the demand for mechanized and upgraded machinery would still keep growing, or still keep needing to evolve, needing our input on that?
Well, a couple of comments. One, as somebody that's not a rice grower, but always enjoyed flying over into Sacramento and seeing those gorgeous rice fields as you contoured those fields to meet for your level. And today they're much square. I know for a producer, it probably gives you more yield per acre. But it
Way
does
more.
make,
When you can get rid of 17 levees in an 80-acre field and come down with only 3
but
levees.
there is something to flying over those fields in the past and seeing the uniqueness to them. And so
It's not as romantic anymore for the people flying into Sacramento, but
Truly, but yes, with the technology, number one, we know that folks aren't going to do the types of jobs in the field, and that's really what we're looking at. Even in the processing area, there's still going to be more of those jobs, higher technology jobs. So for a lot of those individuals that get education, they're going to be still working on farms, running those machines and doing the servicing of those machines. But we know we're going to have a declining labor force. In California, with a 8-hour workday, 40-hour work week, we're going that direction. With a lot of the heat illness standards that we have, that you have to provide shade after 80 degrees, and all the things that we have to do there, we are being driven to go to mechanization. There's just no two ways about it. So even if we, rubbed the crystal ball and we had available labor supply, we're going to be moving towards mechanization. We have to.
Let me drill down on the olive oil a little bit. Mr. Austin Scott was talking about a while ago. Again, several of us took a pretty good run at that in last Farm Bill to the imported oil, the quality. I mean, Americans don't know what good olive oil tastes like, I think, in a lot of cases. The quality, the mislabeling of extra virgin, they're getting away with basically fraud on that. And the crops that we can grow, our neighbor Jamie, who I think is doing all right in that terrible fire in the horrible area here, but right around him, Johansson, they grow beautiful olive oil there. And so the need to have truth in the labeling is important, but also to be competitive. The mechanization in the olive industry. Now, you can grow olive trees, or more like vines these days, that they can be mechanized, but you still have the ones you have to pick for table olives. So what do you see going in that direction?
Well, clearly, that's where we talk about mechanization and plant breeding and trellising and the other things we do. One of the questions was about blueberries. Certainly, as we look to the way that we plant blueberries today, maybe they're going to do it differently in the future. There's work being done. There was a group from China. As a walnut grower, our trees are 40, 50 feet tall. They're working on hedgerowing where the trees are 9 feet tall. So now when you start talking about robotics and other things, and so we've got to make sure we're ahead of that curve, because there's other countries that are making those investments to be able to do that. And currently, you're right, for the fresh olives or the processed olives that you would eat on your table or on your pizza, those are larger trees. They aren't mechanically harvested. So maybe we're going to have to look at ways that we can do that and then utilize the soft touch of a robot to be able to pick those so that we can utilize them for eating and not just eviscerate them for olive oil.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
Gentleman's time expired. Mr. Panetta, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and also thank you for having this hearing on this topic. I truly appreciate it, especially coming from the area that I do on the Central Coast of California. And also thank you, gentlemen, for being here, taking the time and the preparation, and most importantly, your testimony and the information that you provided. You're speaking to me. I hear you loud and clear. It's something that I've been talking about ever since I got here in Congress, because I've been hearing about it well before I got to Congress, about the issues that our people in agriculture face on the Central Coast of California. So I truly appreciate that. Obviously, in the past 5-6 years out in California, we faced, excluding this year, fortunately, but for the past 5 years, we faced a serious drought. And when you would talk to people in agriculture, you would expect maybe that was the #1 issue. No, not at all. Hands down, it was labor. It has always been labor, and the lack of labor there in our fields to help produce the products that you do. And so that's why it's important that you're here and that you're talking about it, and I appreciate that. But as I see it, I mean, there are 2 avenues that we can go in dealing with this issue. The one avenue is, I believe, our responsibility, Congress's responsibility, and that's immigration reform. And I believe, based on what I've seen, and I'd be happy to be corrected, but I believe Congress has failed to address that issue, unfortunately. Last time we had it was in 1986 with Ronald Reagan. And I do know that there was a serious attempt at that in 2013 with Senate Bill 744 most recently. And there are certain efforts that are happening now in Congress, and we'll continue to advocate for you and for those efforts. But we have to, as we work on immigration reform, then the other avenue, though, is mechanization in order to deal with that. And so it's kind of a 2-avenue approach, and your being here helps both those avenues. One, the advocacy for immigration reform, but also talking about mechanization and what we can do. In the meantime, we got to keep our workers here. And Kevin, I appreciate it. You've talked about the technology that you've started to implement, and I was actually out in the field a month ago with Miles Ryder, the chairman of Driscoll's, and I saw some of the tabletops that were there. And just briefly, if you could tell us about the tabletops. I think people need to hear about that.
Yeah, so this is a technology that's being around for a long time, especially in Europe. Now, Europe is facing and has faced in the past many of the issues that are coming here. So they've always had issues with labor and never had enough people to pick it. Pesticides, fumigants have been a problem there. Their methylbromide's been banned for many years. So some of the issues we're facing, they've already faced. And so what they did, it drove them into substrate type of controlled environment production. So the tabletop is a system of tabletops, basically, that are about 4 feet off the ground. The product is grown in a substrate, which is a special type of material that is good for the berries, and then it makes it easier for people to pick standing up. So as I said earlier, the idea is to attract people to the industry as well as make it easier for folks to do it. We also think that mechanization might be easier in that system because it's more sort of precise. You're not dealing with the ground as much as you are. So I think these solutions are all going to have to come together. So the mechanization of harvesting and the more sophisticated growing techniques as well as the packing techniques all have to be an integrated system. And so that sometimes the solution is just not in the harvesting, but in the integration of all these efforts. But I'll be honest with you, it's going to take a long time for that to get done. Now, we're going to work hard to try and make it faster than that, but it doesn't all come together easy, as Gary just said. And that's where I think the government can help private industry. There are lots of these startup companies that are that are around. They've come actually from companies like Google and others in the Silicon Valley that have got this technology. They're young, innovative groups that are coming together, very entrepreneurial, and they want to partner with ag to get some of these solutions going. And I would strongly encourage that this Farm Bill identifies that. It speaks to our best entrepreneurial spirit, and to the extent that money can be allocated to some of this automation, whether it be the harvesting or the growing or whatever it is. But I think that's a spot where money could be allocated to private industry. I don't think the universities in this area are going to be able to do the work that's required. I think they're very valuable for other areas. And as the chairman mentioned in his speech around pesticides and other things, I think that's very important. But in this fast-moving area of mechanization and robotics, private industry is the way to go. And I'd like to see the Farm Bill, in a creative way, allocate resources in that manner that could speed it up rather than slow it down.
Agreed. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman's time has expired. Mr. Yoho, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you gentlemen being here, and it's very interesting, this topic today. It's one that's dear to my heart. I've been in agriculture since I was about 15 years of age, and you guys have touched on everything that's important that we need to cover. And so let me start with you, Mr. Wanger. You mentioned your organization's strong support for the Whole Farm Revenue Protection Program, created as a pilot in 2014. How does this program better serve many specialty products and producers, and are there specific improvements that you would suggest for this?
Yeah, there's a number of them, and so we look forward to working with you on it. One, we think to provide flexibility, keep it a pilot program. It is very complicated. Talking to those folks that have tried to utilize it, the paperwork and trying to track everything is very complicated. Also, the $8.5 million level is very problematic for a lot of our folks. As Mr. Peterson said earlier, when you look at the value and the investment of some of the specialty crops, recently we had the American Farm Bureau Trade Advisory Committee was out, and they were touring the ports, and they met with some of our folks in the Salinas Valley. And one of our growers, they were going to lose a $4 million crop because they didn't have the labor to pick it.
Right.
And so now that wasn't profit, but that was just a $4 million value to bring that in. So it's a step in the right direction, just needs a lot more work. But it is something to be able to provide for specialty crops.
If all of you could maybe submit just recommendations how to improve that program, would be greatly appreciative. Mr. Heler, you were talking about the Texas Bud Program. How's that working in Texas on the citrus screening? As you know, in the state of Florida, 100% of our groves are affected, and this is something that we've got to get ahead of. And the cures are going to be an antibacterial, a GMO, or the budding process or natural selection. What's your thoughts on that? How well is that working?
Clean plant material is the foundation for any good agricultural system, so absolutely necessary. To your point, the solution for HOB is probably a GMO or some of these gene editing techniques that are going to have a plant that's either tolerant or resistant to this particular pathogen. But the program itself is working very well. Again, it's a partnership between industry through checkoff programs, private donations, grants through the university systems. And it's really to provide clean plant material not only to the commercial industry, but to growers and hobbyists around the state, because our neighbors need to have clean material as well. Otherwise, those problems will come from those areas and potentially affect us.
Okay, and Mr. Wishnatzki, it's great to hear you talk about the University of Florida and promoting IFAS. Let's see, my question for you, where'd it go? You spoke a lot about the labor situation. I feel confident that we will fix this in this Congress.
Good.
We've got an ag guest worker program that we're working. We're going to talk with Chairman Goodlatte, and there's Rick Crawford has some also, a bill. And in concert, I'm sure we can orchestrate a solution for this soon, because it's something that we hear over and over again from all of our producers. But I'm also very optimistic about you talking about the mechanization and the robotics. Do you feel like that's something that should be industry-driven, the entrepreneur, the innovator out there, and not wait on a federal government program?
Absolutely. I mean, the effort I've undertaken has been highly collaborative. I went to a number of competitors that have invested money in this, so I mean, that speaks to the need. University systems are doing a wonderful job for us in research into pest issues, disease issues, but there's also there needs to be some money, I think, set aside for the private sector that, especially in collaborative efforts like the one we undertook. But there's this mechanization is kind of the last frontier in agriculture, because for years there's been ways to harvest crops, destructive ways where you pick them once and you're done. But many of these crops that we're trying to mechanize now are selective in nature, so you have to come back again and again.
I think we'll get there, and I think you guys leading the charge in the industry is what's really going to be the catalyst for that. I just want to, Mr. LaVine, I just want to talk to you about gene editing. You know, we've heard a lot about GMO, and we've talked certainly enough about that, but one of the things with citrus screening is one of the GMOs, and we're seeing our processors putting on their bottles non-GMO. They're killing themselves, and they need to educate the public, because as you brought up, gene editing is different than some of the other techniques. Gene editing is facilitating Mother Nature in picking certain phenotypes that we want to express in the plant, in the plant, and it's a natural selection process that we've just kind of sped along. And so the media campaign needs to be behind that to really, really promote that. And I'm out of time, and I can't really have you answer right now, but I look forward to working with you all. Thank you.
Gentleman's time expired. Mr. Costa, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This is an important subject as it relates to not just California agriculture, but the entire country. Mr. Winger, you and I have worked together for many years. We had the drought that everybody knows about, and then this year we've had a lot of rain, and water has not been an issue, but we've had labor as an issue, because many folks that, especially our annual crops that would have liked to plant additional, have been unable to do so, or have hesitated because the labor force is not there. How would you describe the acuteness of the shortage of labor in California in the last several years?
Well, it's very severe. We're going out right now with, about 4 or 5 years ago, we went out with a labor survey to our folks, and we could see that there was huge competition for folks, and we've seen it again this year. We're going out with another labor survey, but when cherries were being harvested, a lot of those folks that were in other jobs, doing other needed jobs for growers, it was a huge cherry crop this year, so it went out. We're paying above market, we're paying a lot more, and so you saw all of a sudden that your labor force was maybe not in your field, but they weren't to pick cherries, and so it's a critical issue, and as we're now getting in the really thick of our harvest season, it's going to continue to be an issue.
And the nuances that people don't understand in terms of the weather and the challenges as to, you just don't leave the crop on the field. If you have the triple-digit temperatures that we're having, it's ready, it's got to get off the field, out of the field.
Well, I might just add real quick, Congressman, we're getting really close to what we were in 2006. We saw the high temperatures. A lot of our peach growers, they saw fruit that was not ripe in the morning was overripe by the afternoon. We saw they had to go through and
No, and it
select
happens that quickly, and that
happens that quickly, and so it takes a lot of labor, and so really a lot of the labor went
Now,
out
what
of
are
those.
the crops that mechanization is not able to handle? I don't know if you have a quick list you can go through, because there's a couple other questions.
Any of the soft, like somebody said, all the ones that when they drop on the ground go plop, probably are the ones that are going to be most difficult. We'll get there. It's going to take time. It's going to take trellising. It's going to take different cultural practices, and it's going
And
to
the
take
private-public partnerships between the land-grant universities have been significant over decades in terms of developing the mechanization. But even then, as we all know, labor and 70% of our workforce in California.
Is that the labor force? What is it?
Yeah, that's, so I think if I'm correct, we aren't even growing the potential that we could grow out of California, for example, in strawberries, because there's not enough people to pick it. So there's a loss of production. But in my testimony, I talked about the waste associated. Is that what you're referring to?
Right.
There's 30%. A lot of it occurs throughout the supply chain. In fact, a good chunk of it actually occurs in the consumer's refrigerator. So when you think about it, farmers throw good berries away because they can't pick them or they go bad, and then we lose them throughout the supply chain, and ultimately the consumer throws them away. And we've done some studies. They don't always, there are other studies that have been done, but roughly 1/3, 30% of berries that had potential to be eaten are not actually eaten. And that is if you think about the amount of resources and money wasted in that's an obvious opportunity. And there's, I think, opportunity in the Farm Bill to continue to work on that throughout the supply chain.
Okay, and real quick, while you're speaking, do the food banks and all of those other different agencies that work to get food to give to people in need, do y'all have a great relationship with them?
Yeah, we do. I think we're the largest supplier of produce to the food bank. So we're happy to do that in California, millions of dollars. So that's we're happy to do that, but that shouldn't be our purpose.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, with that, I'm going to yield back, but I know I still have about 100 more questions to ask, but I got to go to another meeting.
I appreciate it, gentlemen. Mr. Denham, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A very important topic, especially in light of our challenges on immigration
Would you turn your microphone
reform.
on, please? Would you turn your microphone on, please? We can't hear you.
As we've discussed many times in this committee, the need for labor is of huge importance. I am one that wants to continue to fight to make sure that we have full reform on immigration policy, making sure that we can guarantee to the American public not only do we have secure borders and internal security, but obviously that we have a guest worker, guest labor program that allows us to continue to have the safest, greatest agriculture in the world. But with that comes opportunities to mechanize, as we have in the Central Valley, Miamans. What we grow, we're very mechanized, but in the Salinas Valley especially, lettuce, spring mix, especially strawberries, many crops have not gotten to that point yet, and there are some that may never get there. The question is, will we outsource, as we currently are, much of that produce to Mexico and other countries because of their labor source and possibly even sacrifice on the food safety side? Or will we actually be able to address both labor and mechanization so that we can continue to have the best and most abundant agriculture anywhere? And I know this committee, especially when it comes to the Farm Bill, we have done more, not only with specialty crops, but also with ag research. Wonder specifically, Mr. Murphy, first, if you could talk on some of the research that is being done by the UC system or even CSU and our community college level to help automate on the berries, which I believe is one of the most difficult crops to actually mechanize.
Yeah, there is no question. Most of the work on the mechanization of the harvesting of berries is being left up to private industry right now. Mr. Wishnatzki's got a very interesting project, which we're close to, we're involved in a project as well. We're all looking at these various projects. To the extent that we tap into the universities, that's happening. What we do see outside of mechanization is a lot of input and work with universities, especially around pesticide use. We're seeing quite a lot of work. The funding that came out of the Farm Bill and the last thing around food safety, I think, was a really good example of how this should work, where industry, particularly in the Central Valley, came up with their own approach to food safety, and through some of the money through the Farm Bill and some of the thoughts that came out of that Farm Bill, we've been able to really kick it up a gear after that spinach food safety issue. So that's another area. Most of the university stuff and research is done, I think, on stuff not related to automation. But ultimately, I think in this area, as I said earlier today, it's really going to be a public-private sector work in this regard. That's where most of the energy is right now. And as I said earlier, with Google and others getting involved, that's where that energy is.
Thank you. And Mr. Winger, glad to have you here once again. Incidentally, Mr. Winger is a constituent of mine. So not only am I a member of the Farm Bureau, but proud to have you here as a constituent. If you could answer the same question, especially when it concerns both the industry as well as your member companies that are either expanding to other countries, either due to mechanization unavailable to certain commodities or by just the lack of labor. And maybe you can also touch on the H-2A program. And I know that there are a number of your members that have really, really tried to make that work, even still seeing a huge shortage.
Yeah, time is short, so we won't be able to spend much time on it. H-2A is certainly for a lot of those folks that have a longer term and a set number when they need to know their workers, set number of workers for a set time. H-2A works for them. It's very difficult to get through the H-2A program, though. We need to make it less cumbersome, but we still need a portability system that allows workers to go from field to field, crop to crop. I might just add real quickly, as we talk about all these issues and we talk about regulations and we talk about innovation in California, in our highly regulated area, especially when you think about the cap and trade that's now going on in Sacramento, we talk about facilities limits on the amount of emissions that you can have for our processing plants and others is even bigger than what we want to talk about. When we think about innovation for mechanization and the striving for a Tier 4 final engine, but we have the uniqueness of so many different types of engines that we don't have companies making the engines for them to drive the machines for the mechanization. So there's a lot more we can talk about when we have time to talk about it, but certainly regulation does drive innovation. But in California, unfortunately, I think we're seeing that regulation is stifling it.
Gentleman's time has expired. By the way, Costa claimed him as a constituent as well. So are you saying that Mr. Winger committed voter fraud? He votes for both you guys?
He farms in a lot of areas.
Yes. Mr. Soto, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have the honor of representing Central Florida, where we have a ton of citrus, a ton of cattle, and then also a very big blueberry and strawberry industry in our area. I wanted to first start off with Mr. Heler. You know, we were really fortunate to get over $125 million in citrus greening research money. An additional $41 million, I believe, was added in there in this last omnibus. And it basically addresses the fact that we've had a 70% reduction in production of citrus in Florida. I was wondering, what's the reduction in Texas right now?
So each region of the country is at a different state in the disease progression. In Texas right now, there has not been a significant reduction in productivity within our groves. We're probably 5 to 7 years behind the disease curve or cycle as it's occurring in Florida. We're hoping and learning that things will be different, or learning from Florida's experience and hoping we can manage differently. But certainly, those funds that you mentioned and those dollars, while they haven't found a solution, they've been instrumental in building a foundation and understanding of the disease, and are leading us closer to hopefully what will be a solution for all the different regions across the United States.
And so you believe that we'll still need substantial resources to continue to address the citrus greening condition?
Yes, this problem is not solved, Mr. Soto. I think that continued funding will be necessary. Again, there's a lot of work to be done, and there's probably not one answer. There's going to be many different types of science that'll come into play. So funding does need to continue on this issue, and there'll be other pest and disease issues. So this has been a very important tool for citrus producers, again, the different regions, California, Texas, Florida. We want to see it stay in the Farm Bill. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just a note, I think we can head this thing off with the pass still if we continue to, both for your state and mine, if we continue to fund it. Mr. Wishnatzki, welcome to Washington. It's an honor to host you up here. In Polk County, we have a ton of blueberries and strawberries, and I want to compliment our berry growers for hitting the mark this year. Last year, blueberries did not meet that 3-4 week window. We're the only berries in the United States, which is a very unique situation for us. Obviously, strawberries have been more consistent to hitting that mark. So my first question is for how are the crop insurance tools to help with these highs and lows of if you miss that 3-4 week window?
Yeah, quite frankly, we're not using crop insurance in strawberries because I don't believe there's anything specific to strawberries, to the best of my knowledge. The whole farm insurance maybe is something that we're beginning to look at, but I don't believe any of our associated growers are utilizing that program right now either.
What about for blueberries?
And blueberries, the same thing.
Do you think it would benefit, since we have such a highs and lows, depending if you hit that window, if you all had better access to crop insurance?
Oh, absolutely. If there was a means to help level out some of those dips, because quite frankly, Florida strawberries over the last 5 years had been very challenged because of several issues, related to competition and related to labor availability. So.
And I wanted to go into labor. If we had a revised farm worker, guest worker program where it was a 3-year or 5-year term rather than a 1-year, that would only be revoked if that individual committed a crime and they'd have to go back each season, would that be a benefit to the industry?
Oh, absolutely. If there was a means to keep folks here, I mean, in Florida, the work goes on, into the summer. It doesn't. There's usually a few slower months, so they would probably find other work in other neighboring states. But having the availability of labor and having them there would be a great benefit. And I'm not sure that that's possible with getting that through, but it would be a benefit if it was.
Anything's possible with an act of Congress, sir. I wanted to finish by talking about, a lot of our specialty crops have faced stiff competition by other countries that have far lower costs. So how key is the specialty crop block grant and other programs in addressing trade inequities?
Is that a question for me?
Yes.
It's vital. I mean, we need to fund our land grant universities with these funds because there's so many problems with pests, diseases that come about that we really depend on that resource. So in no way, shape, or form would I advocate that funds be taken from that to go to something else. I mean, automation is important as well, and I think there needs to be additional funds made available for that.
Gentleman's time expired. Mr. Thompson, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for being here, part of this important hearing, important topic. In the House of Representatives, jurisdiction over the Domestic Nutrition and Food Assistance Program is split between this committee and the Education Workforce Committee. I chair the subcommittee on nutrition and in the Agriculture Committee and a senior member of the Education Workforce Committee. I'm curious about your experience with specialty crops and programs like Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program and the SNAP program to allow recipients to make specialty crop purchases at farmers market. And how do you think these programs are working? And I throw that out to whoever would like to respond.
Well, I can't respond to the specifics of the programs. Maybe I'll ask some other folks here. But I have a real passion. I think we need to have the kids stop eating candy and start eating fruits and vegetables. And so anything that can help our kids eat berries instead of candy is a good thing. So that would be my perspective. And I'm actually encouraged to see in general, consumers doing a lot more of that. Younger families, you see them eating a lot more berries, and that's great for our business, but I think it's also great for their health. I would That's my point, but how the programs work, I'd have to ask some of these other folks here.
Yeah, I think having this, the SNAP program is very important. Going to farmers markets is great as long as it can be monitored, having the EBT cards and whatnot to allow folks to specialty crops, and also having it to when the fresh isn't available, the canned, frozen, or dried, for those that would be out of season is still very, very important. But as you said, having on these nutrition programs access to crops grown here in the United States is extremely important. The SNAP program is extremely important for that.
Anyone else care to weigh in? If not, let me go to my second question. Some of you mentioned both the Specialty Crop Research Initiative and the Agriculture and Food Research Initiative as ideal places for mechanization funding through the next Farm Bill. A significant effort was made in the last Farm Bill to ensure research projects supported under the Specialty Crop Research Initiative were based on both scientific merit and relevancy to the industry. What are some of the specific examples of the ways your industry has benefited from SCRI as a result of that?
I can speak to the citrus perspective there. The Citrus Disease Subcommittee it provides the relevancy guidance, I guess, to the scientific community with regards to HOB. As I mentioned earlier, the progression of the disease within each individual region of the United States is different, so growers' needs are different. So having that as part of the discussion and the focus, I think, has been very beneficial to guiding the research in the direction to address not just a particular part of the country's needs, but the whole country. So that grower stakeholder involvement, I think, is very important.
Yeah, Dr. Jack Rexsiegel, who's the head of the Gulf Coast Research Center, he made me aware of a program that's actually, it's a multi-state interdisciplinary project on tomatoes, which is not my area of specialty, but I had asked him prior to coming here about giving me some examples of just what you're asking. And that project actually brings together 13 researchers from 6 different universities representing 5 states, working towards a common goal to improve the tomato health with xanthomonas is actually what they're trying to solve. So, yeah, I think there's many more examples.
Sure.
Of that.
Oh, that was a great example.
Yeah, the Specialty Crop Research Program, too, as I mentioned in our presentation, Cornell University has used it to help develop varieties of broccoli that are much more acclimated to produce on the East Coast versus the dry weather, the West Coast and the Valley. And so Dr. Bjorkman there at Cornell has done great work in identifying those characteristics within broccoli that are more favorable for a moisture, humid climate on the East Coast, and enabling farmers to produce it out this way.
While I have your attention, Mr. LaVine, I'm interested in the lettuce public-private partnership that you discussed at the University of California, Davis. How can you talk about how NIFA and AFRA funds have been used in collaboration with private dollars?
Yeah, the lettuce consortium out there in the Salinas Valley came together with Davis and USDA, NIFA, to really look at the challenges of mildew and other production issues that are impacting lettuce production. There's a lot of issues of plant pest and disease that reside in the soil that you have to rotate the crop, and you've got a limited number of time. So you had seed companies come together for the private funding, brought germplasm to the table, their own private germplasm, working with the university and USDA in federal dollars to develop varieties that are more acclimated to address those issues, resistance when they could induce resistance, and really move forward with varieties that meet that new packaging that the consumer wants, but also enable them to produce as well as possible with limiting the inputs if also possible.
Joe's time expired. Ms. Custer, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to note how bipartisan the approach is today in terms of labor, immigration, comprehensive immigration reform, and also our agreement on eating fruits and vegetables. I talked to my 25-year-old son on the phone last night. He'd been to the dentist. And it turns out I was right all those years that I was recommending fruits and vegetables instead of candy. And now he's come around to our approach. So I'd love to work with you to encourage that that diet. In our home state of New Hampshire, specialty crops are particularly important. And we've got berries, we've got apples, and leafy greens. And I just want to highlight a new startup operation. It's called Leaf Farms, a new branch of Pleasant View Garden, and it's a fully automated indoor greenhouse able to produce up to a dozen varieties of lettuce and other greens, delivering their products within 24 hours of harvest locally, which you can imagine for us, when it's 10 degrees in the winter, the idea of fresh lettuce is very exciting. So it leads me to my question about moving on from the immigration issues for labor. We've talked about mechanization and automation. What resources are needed to support the development of mechanization? And stated a little bit differently, in our current education system, do we have the right mix of teaching and techniques and skills for staff to service robotics and various technology? And I guess this came up also in California, but just looking to the future of more automated agriculture, what should we be thinking about for education and skills training?
So in my testimony, I mentioned 5 very powerful factors that are coming together here around pesticide and fumigants and climate change and availability of resources. And my conclusion from this is that those are all driving us towards more automated, controlled environments. And so what the example of leaf is what you talked about is the sort of extreme edge of that work. Quite frankly, in the U.S., we are behind. In Asia, this is something they've been doing. There's over 500 factory farms alone in Japan. Theirs have been driven by the similar issues, and plus they don't have a very good climate. So it's still on the cutting edge, or maybe even in some cases, some people would say the bleeding edge. But there is no question that there will be some part of our production that moves in that regard. It just makes too much sense. In other words, where you have your nursery producing plants in these growth chambers that ultimately go into what we would call these factory farms or growth chambers that you can grow the product and you actually can distribute it right to the store within a few kilometers.
So I guess, I'm sorry, just to bring this up, my question, because we had talked earlier about, you said berry picking is for the young. Is there, are there opportunities in our current labor market for this approach, and what kind of skills would be needed to do these jobs of servicing the machinery and even the other STEM jobs that you've talked about, the kind of high-tech growing?
I think it would just require more education because it becomes automation rather than manual labor. So there's no question that that would be part of the equation.
Right.
I think you're seeing some very creative operations out there today. Universities, the land-grant side of a university reaching across campus and talking to the engineering department.
Yeah.
And you now see them talking to community colleges so that they can work in operations with respect to irrigation systems and the computer systems and GPS and drone technology. And so a lot of the land-grant institutions are reaching out to Lake City Community College in North Florida from the University of Florida, or the community college in Salinas Valley and Davis, working with them. So that encouragement to work out somewhat outside of the mold that we have in the current land-grant institution, and those creative deans that are saying, we can find additional labor here to help our customers, the growers out there.
My time is up, but one of the local farms that I visited, the ceiling, the roof of the building opens and closes based upon the time of day and the precipitation, totally computerized. It was really quite extraordinary. So thank you. I yield back.
Last time has expired. Recognize myself for 5 minutes. Again, thank you, gentlemen, for being here. We've had a lot of complaints about the implementation of the Food Modernization and Safety Act, and get y'all's thoughts on its implementation. Are there things that are being done correctly or incorrectly that you would share with the committee?
I might just start by saying we certainly know, and the folks dealing with the leafy green in the Salinas Valley and the leafy green marketing agreement, what we did, and then the Food Safety Modernization Act. Unfortunately, I think any well-intentioned plan can sometimes run amok, and certainly as we've seen the implementation of the Food Safety Modernization Act, it has become its own cottage industry. And so what we see in California is a lot of folks going, what should have been at the first point of processing is now going out into the field. And some of the water monitoring and everything that you have to do that really has no reflection on the safety of the food once it gets to the processor and to the consumer. So while it's well-intentioned, I think there needs to be a lot of work to make sure and bring it back to the focus of its original intent.
Other comments?
From the seed side, Mr. Chairman, we are experiencing some challenges that we're working with FDA as they look at the implementation. You can imagine when you have seed that is cracked or not able to be used for planting because the shell is damaged, it still has a nutritional value across the board, and it can be used in feed. And so it's now being considered in some cases an ingredient in feed when there's really no risk at all, given the way that we produce seed and the way that seed is handled. So we're working with them. It's one of those cases that just went a bit too far, and trying to get them to back off of that as we go forward.
What's been y'all's experience dealing with, we don't have jurisdiction over FDA, so I can beat the dog out of them in this room, but what's your experience with them in terms of wanting to cooperate and to help understand? We all want safe food, but we also want regulations that make sense and you can live with. What's been your you've been working with them directly. What's been your experience?
Yeah, my experience, so far, I'm on the board of Florida Fruit and Vegetable Association, and they, had a representative who came and spoke with the board, and I get the impression that they're are doing a lot with outreach and trying to, identify the pain points and what things are wrong. So, from my perspective, I believe they're doing a pretty good job. It's a big undertaking.
I think they've been very receptive in listening to the issue, is trying to find the way out of evaluating where the risk is and then determining how do we don't see a risk here, so how do we move you out of this process so there's not an issue and all the seed plants across the country don't have to register as food facilities.
And again, I'm just going to say, as we start to maybe look for some retrenchment and going back, it's as if we're not for safe food. And so that puts you in a very paradoxical position that if you say, let's take a look at it again, that somehow you're saying we're not wanting to deliver safe food, and that's just not true. So we have to encourage, let's take a look at practical things that we can do to make sure that food is safe.
I got you. The couple of you mentioned innovation. Are there regulatory barriers to the work you're trying to do with robotics or whatever the innovations out there? Are there things that we need to consider removing from the regulatory scheme that slows that down or hampers that from actually getting to where you want to get it done at a speed that you think you can make it happen?
Yeah, it just seems like, especially in California, every time you want to come up with a new idea, you've got to prove it many times over. So we could have a long discussion on that, Mr. Chairman. But yes, it's even what I said earlier, coming down to engines. We've got cleaner engines, but they're just never clean enough.
Right.
And so as we're asking people to invest in new mechanization that would be robotics, it would be drones and other things, there will be some offsetting things with it, but let's not let the perfect be the enemy of good.
Yeah.
I just want to add, at this point, my Harvest Crew Robotics company is, still in development. So you might ask me this question in a couple of years when we begin commercialization, what kind of things we're running up against, because I suspect that we're going to find some regulatory problems down the road. But at this point in time, we're still just developing.
Our biggest issues are the crop right now. It's a very soft berry, and trying to sort that out. But I think down the road there'll probably be an ask at some point.
Okay. Well, as you do come across those regulatory schemes or problems that aren't working, we'd be keen on understanding it and try to figure out how we can work with that. Time has expired. I recognize Ms. Plaskett for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, gentlemen. Mr. LaVine, I wanted to ask you, the 2014 Farm Bill provided for significant investment in agricultural research for specialty crops. There was an $80 million per year for Specialty Crop Research Initiative and $85 million a year for Specialty Crop Block Grant Program. Could you give examples of cutting-edge research that's emerged from these programs?
There's a number that have come through that the researchers are looking at with respect to the specialty crop arena in the disease pressure that growers are experiencing. I did mention one earlier that's key is the broccoli production. It was very, very difficult for growers to produce broccoli in the East Coast. Mildew and other issues were devastating crops. Through molecular marker techniques and working with the Specialty Crop Grant Program, they were able to develop varieties that are more favorable for the East Coast. Very similar to tomato production in California, in looking at how the process is done and what diseases were impacting them most. How do you improve the varieties, enabling them to be less susceptible to those diseases? So we really tried to focus on those areas where you had a collaboration between the grower community, in our case, the seed companies and the breeders and the university, the USDA, to address those localized programs. And those specialty crop grants were invaluable to those processes.
Do you feel, as we're working through the Farm Bill coming up now, that this is the right amount of money, or that additional funding should be provided for this kind of research?
Well, that's always the question. In this area, we can always use additional resources. As we see climate change issues, we see pest and disease moving. Mother Nature is a wonderful adapter. And as we develop varieties that are resistant, as we develop other agrochemicals that will help us produce, she adapts. And so we have to be able to do that as well. And the specialty crop grants enable our research and science community to be able to develop those varieties that can address those. So it's invaluable to have it. It's always good to have more available as we address the challenge.
So you talked about disease. At the University of the Virgin Islands, in our extension program, they deal a lot with supporting our local farmers in not so much disease as also water issues, irrigation, other kinds of crop safety. And I wanted to know if you could address some of that, some of these irrigation programs, or do you see that happening in other places as well? Or do any of you?
Yeah, recently, some of the research initiative funds were used by the University of California and the Almond Board to come up with, to monitor the amount of water use by almond trees and to have real-time water usage. As you probably heard during the drought, a gallon an almond, and it seemed to be everywhere on the press. And so utilizing these funds that were available and other such funds to be able to look for that technology that leaves water in the system for other uses. So they've been used.
One of the things that I'm interested in hearing from you all, Mr. Wegner, others, if you could talk about, is you've talked quite a bit about specialty crops. In the Virgin Islands, we have specialty crops. Probably, very tropical, but also very small in terms of our ability to compete with foreign crops that come in, whether it be from Guatemala or others. There's no way on our islands we're going to be able to grow as much mango as Guatemala does or other places like that. What support can these programs give to the diversification of crops here in the United States to sustain farmers who are not operating on huge, enormous tracts of land?
Well, that's what really helps with, I think, with the block grants. It does leverage the money from the taxpayer, and so you have others that join in for whether it's research or whether it's doing marketing. Some block grants have been used for, as we were saying before, with the olive oil industry to be able to help market locally or domestically produced oil, olive oils, against imports that maybe aren't adequately marked. And so having those funds, I think, help the smaller grower because you've gonna leverage the taxpayer dollar at the same time.
Do you find that most of these smaller growers end up being in, what would be terms as like the fancy foods area or things like that?
Some of them, and a lot of them come together in co-ops and whatnot, and so can work together to be able to apply for these grants and to meet that very specialty designer food market.
Yeah, and I just think, I know I'm running out of time, but the cooperation, and the co-ops, I think, are going to be really key. In the Virgin Islands, we're really looking to creating cooperatives among the smaller farmers for food processing plants, to be able to qualify for that and support it, and the block grants are really helpful. Thank you so much, Mr.
Time
Chair.
expired. Mr. Moffett, did you have additional comments?
Yeah, please. 3 minutes?
3 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. I wanted to come to Mr. Murphy for just a bit. We're talking about new technology and innovation here, and sometimes it isn't available. And so what we see with the need for methyl bromide, we don't really have a good replacement for this in certain applications. I'm working on a bill, H.R. 1891, to allow a little broader use, et cetera. But could you comment, please, on what the bill's seeking to do is that right now the power lies with the EPA to decide an emergency use. It still has the ability for emergency application and under EPA guidance. What I'm seeking to do is to keep it around as an emergency tool, but also switch that authority to the USDA, which has a much better idea of what's going on with crops, et cetera. So, you mentioned lack of access to any kind of fumigants. What would be your comment to me about this barrier we have to be able to utilize it, especially for our strawberry growers we have in Northern California and around the country?
So certainly methyl bromide was a fantastic tool for our industry for many, many years. Its most urgent use is actually in our nurseries. What we need to is have clean plants so that we can send those to our farmers, around the country and make sure that they have good plants that they can grow. So if there was any area that needed particular attention, that would be the area that I would focus on, making sure that our nurseries have that capacity and that capability. So that's really important.
So clean nursery plants, yeah.
Clean nursery plants, because one plant in the nursery generates maybe 10 daughter plants that ultimately get sent out. So its use in that concentrated form is very, very valuable. And there is really no solution in the nurseries that we've come up with at this point that's viable. We're doing a lot of work on different forms of disinfestation of the soil using all sorts of anaerobic processes. There's chloropicrin. There's lots of things going on, but the net of it all is we haven't reached a stage where we have the same capacity that methyl bromide has.
Basically, on those seed ones, it's very critical.
Well, it's more in berries. We plant propagate, so it's for the propagation of the plants in the nurseries.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Winger. Please comment on that from a California perspective with methyl bromide and an emergency USDA. I'll stop.
Well, I was here many, many years ago talking about that very issue about replacements for methyl bromide, and I can remember that even those that were in favor and being challenged by the chairman at the time, what are the alternatives? And the response was, there is no silver bullet. It will take multiple different technologies and chemicals to do what methyl bromide does in one fell swoop. It has been used very safely. And it's an issue that there really is no replacement for methyl bromide, and it's going to create a lot of other maybe undesirable alternatives that we're going to have to look at.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Ms. Plaskett, do you have anything else? No, thanks. All right, thank you. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for being here today. Covered a variety of subjects, and all of them important to the specialty crop industry. Beat the labor issue to death. It's a fixable problem. That Chairman Goodlatte, Chairman of the Judiciary Committee, has jurisdiction over all of that issue. All of us are in conversation with him about his proposed plan that would work to expand the H-2A program, make it more workable, make it where you could folks could stay here and work. The dairymen, the processors who need folks every single day, row crops that need them from time to time. All those issues are there. The idea of an immediate E-Verify and the impact it would have on the workforce is not lost on Mr. Goodlatte or the rest of us in terms of how we implement that. The opportunity to create programs would be evergreen in the sense that as people do decide to do something else, that workers could come in behind them and replace that aging workforce as it moves forward. And then the inexorable drive and move toward mechanization and robotics and all of those kind of things will continue at the pace that the shortages sometimes, necessities of mother invention, so to speak. We'll have to fix that. You look at the big row commodity crops, corn, cotton in particular, not a lot of sweat labor left in that because of the demand for labor is such. So thank you for sharing your ideas with us. Under the rules of committee, the record of today's hearing will be made open for 10 calendar days to receive additional material and supplementary written responses from the witnesses to any question posed by a member. This hearing of Committee on Agriculture is adjourned. Thank you.